No, I readily admit I'd much rather be there representing the people of my district. Although it is a little bit of deja vu, right? We new members 2 years ago sat and waited, for those 13, 14 votes to ultimately secure Kevin McCarthy the speakership. I think this gets resolved personally in the next round. I think that some of my former colleagues are withholding votes out of principle. Thomas Massie is stubbornly principled and principally stubborn. And so I don't know that his vote's going to change, but I think a couple of my other colleagues or former colleagues, are sounding the alarm. They have some concerns, but I think they come along and Mike Johnson pulls out the win, hopefully, I'd expect and think in the second round.
Well, when we consider, sir, the people your former colleagues who didn't vote for Mike Johnson voted for, Byron Donalds, Tom Emmer, Jim Jordan, do you see any of them as really standing a chance if for some reason they prove unbudgeable and Mike Johnson simply can't get to the requisite votes?
Mike Johnson is the only member of the House Republican Conference that can get to 218 votes, frankly, has the support of President Trump, and is the right person to lead the conference and to lead the House, along with Senator Thune in the Senate, to advance President Trump's agenda. I think they get there. It's likely they get there. I have a great deal of affection and admiration for Byron and certainly Tom Emmer. But again, Mike Johnson has proven his ability to navigate an independent group of people. It's just the way it is. I heard the previous comments. Yes, we would much prefer. I certainly know the president and others to have this behind us, one vote. But the truth is the House Republicans are very connected to their districts, very reactive and responsive to their constituents, and are independent thinkers. It's just the way the body works. And, Mike will get there, but sadly, it'll likely it's certainly going to take another round.
I know you expect to see this on the second round, and that would be important for Mike Johnson. But what's really going on here, Congressman? Is this a big PR move? We're raising money, or are there legitimate objections to the way Mike Johnson comports himself as Speaker?
Listen, as I said, Thomas Massie is principled, and he's stubborn, and he's principled. And so his objections are based on things that he sees are value. The process needs to be different. Individual appropriations bills committed to, but keep and an open, much more transparent and communicative process. But, I've served as an executive and a legislator. The Speaker of the House is kind of like an executive, although obviously not entirely. Legislators always want more time and more information. And when we give them more time and more information, they want more time and more information. And so I would just, let me just say quickly, the others, I don't think they're interested in raising money off of this. I think they have reasonable objections. Yeah. I don't agree that they should be withholding votes. I think they moved Mike pretty far along, and Mike Johnson's exactly the kind of personality and person to navigate and to get consensus among these members.
Well, Congressman, as you talk about a desire for more time, it doesn't seem that there will be much time given to members after that first round of voting, though it still has been gavelled out. We don't have the final tally officially. A whip notice, according to our reporters on Capitol Hill, just went out for House Democrats, that members are being told to return to the floor for the second roll call to begin, although we're watching now in real time as Mike Johnson walks off the House floor. So it's not really clear, sir, what's going on at this time. What we do know, is the difficulties. Sorry, please go ahead.
No, listen, I lived through this 2 years ago. We went through multiple votes, didn't leave the floor, as you recall, but there's a great deal of negotiation still going on. Again, is it necessary? No. President Trump has endorsed Mike Johnson. Mike is the right person to mold that consensus among these members, and I think they need to really give him that benefit, certainly of the doubt. But there's still negotiation going on. People are still talking about what are the steps necessary to curry and to earn those last few votes. But again, I don't think Thomas Massie changes his vote. I think the other members ultimately will come along. But again, they're playing a dangerous game. The president has been elected with an agenda and a mandate, like it or not. This is a change election, and he comes into office with a great deal of goodwill. And these members are really risking that. And again, Mike is the right personality and the right capacity as a conservative leader to mold the consensus in that conference to move President Trump's agenda.
Well, we're preparing here, it seems, for a second round. I don't know how long it's going to take to come together. But you look at the folks who did not vote for Mike Johnson, Congressman Ralph Norman is one I'm looking at specifically. And there was, by the way, we witnessed Nancy Mace hand her cell phone to him a short time ago, wondering who might be on the other end of that phone. You can use your imagination. Would he be terribly difficult?
It wasn't me, but I suspect it was somebody with more influence.
Maybe Mar-a-Lago calling?
Maybe. No, I
Is
think
it
that's
possible to
true.
flip Ralph Norman on a second round?
Yes. Yeah. And again, because I think Ralph's objections are less substantive. Listen, some of the members very much want, strong commitments on process and order. And again, it's hard to have delivered that. And they're holding him accountable for being Mike Johnson for being thrust in with no infrastructure to begin. Mike's done a remarkably good job as a brand new Speaker of the House. I mean, truly new in every capacity, and in a bifurcated bipartisan government. He just couldn't force the president and Senate Democrats to agree. With President Trump and now Senator Thune and the majority in the Senate, they're just holding him to a standard that, frankly, will change in a matter of weeks. On January 20th, it is simply our party. And that dynamic will play out with President Trump leading the agenda. And again, I think that somebody like Ralph Norman understands that and will likely come along. Again, I think I've said it clearly. I don't expect Thomas Massie to, but I think the others will. I just think they're holding Mike to a standard that couldn't have been achieved certainly over the last 6 months, but very well can be achieved with a unified government.
And yet, as we see evidence today, sir, he will be dealing with an incredibly thin majority in which he has very few votes that he can afford to lose, especially so initially before special elections can be held in states like yours, where Elise Stefanik, of course, has vacated her district in New York. And it begs the question, especially when we consider issues that I know are high profile in New York, like the future of tax policy and the SALT cap, how difficult it is going to be in a Republican conference so divided in many ways along fiscal lines, with some of these people who held out initially on this roll call really being focused on fiscal matters, how hard that's going to be to get that policy across the finish line, even with Republicans entirely in control of Washington.
Yeah, listen, there's a legitimate concern that within the House Republican majority, there's just so many different factions that cobbling together legislation becomes more complicated. But, to use SALT as an example, the SALT cap, listen, President Trump has said lifting the cap is something he now supports, sees honestly the value of revisiting. If he's leading that charge, I think there's certainly more of a capacity to do it, to achieve it. And then again, through reconciliation, what do they package together? Is this a single bill or two bills? Is it border and taxes? Is it separate? As these decisions get made, they're going to be made in the context of how do you cobble together 218 votes? Let me also say this. I mean, Democrats are not absolved from responsibility. Yeah, I get it on inside politics, like who's the speaker, you kind of camp out on your side. But on public policy, where the president gets elected, again, with a mandate. And there will be those who argue what is a mandate, a majority, a big majority or not. But he was elected with a mandate to change things. If Democrats withhold votes, they run the risk in certain parts of the country for their own sake. And so, frankly, there are going to be some Democrat votes on border security. There'll be some Democrat votes on tax reform and new tax policy that at the end cobbles together the votes. But your point is well taken. This is a conference with many factions that, frankly, is filled with independent thinkers. So cobbling together support is going to be more challenging. But again, that's why Mike Johnson is actually well suited. He doesn't lead with a heavy hand. He doesn't impose his will on you. His job will be to effectuate President Trump's agenda by molding consensus among stakeholders. And these holdouts really have to give Mike credit for his willingness and capacity to do it, truly without seeking revenge or punishment. And that's why I don't understand the holdout. But I think at the end of the day, they'll come along, and Mike will be in a position to, again, mold that consensus around the policy that President Trump wants to move forward, and the American people expect.